Hi everyone, I'd like to welcome you all to my session where I'm going to take you through some tips and tricks on how to create a more inclusive workplace. Now, before we start, I'd like to take a moment to give a big shout out to all of our sponsors. Without these great companies providing sponsorship, events like the Scottish Summit wouldn't be able to happen. So please take a few moments in the app to go and check each of them out and get in touch with them if you'd like to know more about what they do. My name is Zoe Wilson and I work for a UK Microsoft partner called Agilities Limited. I work in the Modern Work business unit as the Head of Enterprise Collaboration and Productivity, and my background is SharePoint predominantly. The Twitter handle SharePoint Zoe probably gives that away a little bit. But in my current role, I get to work across the entire M365 stack, helping people understand the art of the possible and all of the great things that they can do with the tools that they have available to them in the platform. Now, I'd love for you to follow me on Twitter, go and give the event a shout out. And if you'd like to know a little bit more about me, you can go and check out my new blog as well at zoe-365.com. So over the course of the last 12 months, we've seen a huge change in how people work. Last year, the whole world went into lockdown at the same time, which meant that we saw a massive shift to remote working, underpinned by tools like Microsoft Teams and the Microsoft 365 platform. And we achieved a level of transformation in months, which would normally take years to achieve. However, for a lot of people, adapting to this new way of working was challenging, as they struggled with disabilities, with feelings of isolation, with the lack of social connections to colleagues, and with having to find new ways to get work done with systems that they may not have been familiar or comfortable with, and which were just thrown over the fence to them in a very short space of time. So in this session, I'm going to share a few key tips that could help you create a more inclusive workplace. And this is very much going to be a presentation of 4 parts. So I'll start first of all with a very brief overview of some of the features that can help make your life easier if you have accessibility requirements, by showing you some of the top features that are hidden within the Microsoft 365 platform. I'll also show you how you can use some of the built-in features in Word and PowerPoint specifically to create more inclusive content. And then after that, we'll take a look at social connections and how you can use Teams to create and strengthen social connections even when we're all working remotely. And then lastly, we'll look at a few tips to run more inclusive meetings in Teams. And I'll give you one tip in advance here. This isn't a technology problem, it's a people problem. Now, I figured it would be useful to just pause for a moment to understand what we mean by accessibility and why it's so important. Accessibility is literally the ability for people to be able to access systems regardless of their personal circumstances. And you can see some examples on the screen of different types of accessibility requirements across sight, across mobility, across hearing, across speech. And there's also neurodiversity, which isn't shown in this chart, but that's a real big area of accessibility needs. And it's important to note as well that while some accessibility needs are permanent and may require long-term adaptations, some of them could just be temporary or situational. So last year, one of my architects was on a cycling accident and he fell off and broke his shoulder, and this was for his dominant hand. So for a short while, what this meant was that he struggled to work effectively. However, thanks to some of the features that I'm going to show you today and the fact that I've drilled this into all of my colleagues, he was able to access the systems and he was able to continue working, albeit a little bit slower than he normally would have been able to. And I'm also frequently on calls as well with parents who are homeschooling, and they're having to hold their child to keep them quiet. And this too is a situation where accessibility adaptations could come in handy. And there are tools within the Microsoft 365 platform that can help. So I'm going to show you a few of the features that are available within the platform, within the Office apps, and how they can help from an accessibility perspective. However, what I would say is that I am barely scratching the surface with what I'm showing you today. And that actually across the whole Microsoft 365 stack, from operating system through to the browser, the mobile apps, the full Office clients, the Teams app, there are loads of accessibility capabilities. And if you'd like to know more, if you go to my blog, there is a link on there to a session that I did last year, which has a deeper look at some of the features available across the M365 platform. Now, first up, we've got the dictate feature in Word. And on the GIF, you can see the dictate feature being activated within the Word app. However, you can also find this in the other Office apps as well, so creating a new email if you're working in OneNote and so on. And the dictate feature is pretty good now at understanding accents, and it's improved significantly over the last few years. You can tell once you've switched it on by the little red record sign that appears on the dictate button, and then you just start talking. You can dictate punctuation, you can see that it will capture the words, and then once you finish a sentence it goes back and it can actually correct it once it looks at the context and what it thinks you were trying to say. And it's pretty clever. It's not, it's not going to be accurate like 100% of the time, but if you're in a position where you can't type for one reason or another, it's a really great way to to be able to at least get what you're trying to say down on paper, so to speak. Now, next, staying in Word, we'll take a quick look at something called the Immersive Reader. The Immersive Reader is a brilliant tool that caters to a wide range of accessibility needs, and it provides a number of tools that can basically change how content is shown to you on the page to make it easier for you to read and digest and understand. It provides tools that can sustain attention, that can improve reading speed, reduce fatigue, improve word recognition, reduce visual crowding, and so making it easier for you to be able to read and understand the words that are on the screen. Being able to change the background colour can make it easier on your eyes, and breaking words into syllables and reducing the amount of text that you've got on the screen can help people who are dyslexic. Now, Immersive Reader is available across the platform as well, including the Edge browser, including when you look at messages in Teams, and it is incredibly powerful. So I talk about accessibility quite a lot, and I actually gave a session a couple of years ago, and one of the people who was watching was an autistic chap who came up to me a couple of weeks later and said that the stuff that I'd shown him in the Immersive Reader had transformed his life, and it had had a huge impact because it made it easier for him to actually be able to read and digest what people were saying in the content they sent to him. So it does work. Then staying in Word, but again, this is another feature that's available across the platform as well. We've got the Read Aloud function, and this is the opposite of the dictate feature really, and it's one that I find really useful. So under the Review tab on the ribbon, you'll find the Read Aloud button, and when you press it, it's going to start reading the text aloud to you from where the cursor is in the document. You can change the reading voice, you can change the reading speed, and the highlighted word allows you to follow where the voice is as it moves through the document. So this is another really useful tool for people who struggle with reading, for people who might have learning difficulties, dyslexia, dyspraxia. And actually it's a really effective way to be able to consume documents without sitting at your screen as well. So, again, if you imagine the scenario we've got now where people are, having to parent at the same time as they work, this is a really great way for them to be able to kind of read and understand content whilst not actually having to sit at their desk and read the content. And actually, this has got some other practical uses as well. So I use this quite a lot for reviewing documents, whether it's a document I've been working on or whether it's something a colleague has sent to me. When you listen to something, it uses a different part of your brain to process it. And, sometimes if you're writing a proposal or a statement of work or a bid response, you might have been just stuck in this document for days to the point where you can't tell anymore whether it sounds right. And actually listening to it can tell you straight away if some of the sentences are structured wrong, if you've got big run-on sentences, if you're using the same word 3 times within 3 lines or something like that. So it's a really great way to just make sure that what you're saying when you write something actually sounds right as well. Now, the last accessibility feature that I'm going to show you in the Office apps is subtitles in PowerPoint. So this is something that you can turn on from the slideshow ribbon in PowerPoint. Then when you put that into presenter view, it kicks in and the subtitles will automatically appear underneath your content. This, as you can see in the GIF, I mean, this is incredibly powerful. And PowerPoint's not the only place in the Office apps where captions are available. You can also turn on closed captions in Stream when you either upload or view a video. And you can turn on live captions in meetings and for Teams live events as well. So this is a really great way. It's a really simple thing that you can do to make your content more inclusive. And a really easy way to help them follow along with the presentation. And, you know, as with the Dictate, the artificial intelligence that's used to do the language transcribing, it's a lot better than it used to be. You know, so it's a super simple thing that you can do to be more inclusive. And that moves us on nicely to the second part of our content. So in this section, we're going to look at how you can create more inclusive content. Now, studies show that over 11 million people in the UK are disabled. And for up to 70% of those, the disabilities are hidden, whether it's hearing conditions, visual impairment, neurodiversity. And what this means is that there is a good chance that some of your colleagues, some of your customers, some of your family have got disabilities that can make it hard for them to engage with your content, and you probably don't even know about them. And if the stuff that you produce is inaccessible, you could be unintentionally excluding people from participating. There are some really, really simple, easy things that you can do that will make it easier for people to be able to read and understand your content. It's easy to do. It's the right thing to do. And in fact, I'd go so far as to say, you know, we've got a moral obligation actually to be as inclusive as possible. And the bonus is that we can increase the reach of our content as well. Now, before we move on, I just want to point out the feature that I'm using in the GIF that you can see on screen, because this is something that I'm going to mention in both the Word and the PowerPoint sections. And this is the accessibility checker. Now, first of all, let's have a look at some of the quick things that you can do in Microsoft Word to make your content more inclusive. First, the most important one, and the thing that you should do whenever you start, turn on the accessibility checker. It's an incredibly powerful tool that will tell you the things that are wrong with your document that make them hard for people with accessibility requirements to read, and it will tell you how to fix them as well. And these other things that we've got on this slide, these are just some of the examples of things that the accessibility checker will tell you to fix. So first of all, make sure you set alternative text for any images. This will help people who are using screen readers understand what the purpose of the image is. And if you don't do this, you might as well have not bothered including the image at all, because the meaning will be completely lost. You can use styles to define headers and sections and structure the document. And this is really important from a navigation perspective and benefits people who are using things like screen readers. Limit the use of tables. Now, tables are an accessibility nightmare and an absolute bugbear of mine, particularly when you start to get merged or split cells. Now, the way that screen readers work with tables is that it counts through the cells, through the columns, through the rows, and having things like merged cells or split cells can really confuse the screen reader. And you know, if it loses count and starts to spit out content in the cells in the wrong order, you might as well have not bothered putting the table in at the first place. And this includes nested tables as well. So I really hate seeing Word documents where the Word document itself is just one giant table that's split into sections for people to complete. And then you get people who fill the document in and they put nested tables inside this master table. It's just really bad practice, and it's something that you should avoid at all costs. You know, it's an accessibility nightmare. And a side benefit of using tables less is that you'll improve the co-authoring experience as well, because tables can be really painful when you're co-authoring with lots of people, because Word will lock up an entire table if someone is editing part of it. So, you know, 100% avoid tables, avoid nested tables, avoid merged cells. You know, it's just think about how you're structuring your content. And then the last tip for creating more inclusive Word documents is avoid hard to read text contrast. So if I just jump back to my previous slide again, you'll see above the image banner, I've got a faint grey line with my name and then some yellow highlight. And actually, the first time I run the accessibility checker, it tells me that this is hard to read contrast. And what that means is that for people with vision impairment, the contrast between the highlight and the text isn't enough for it to be easy for people to read. So this is just a really simple thing that you can do to help make it easier for people to read your content. And the good news is the accessibility checker will pick up all of these issues and it will help tell you how to fix them as well. Now, moving on to PowerPoint. So PowerPoint, by its very nature, is a visual tool. So it's important to make sure that your slides are clear, easy to read, and with content on the slide moving in a logical order. And as with Word, when you're creating a PowerPoint deck, the first thing that you should do is to turn on accessibility checker and keep it running while you work. Now again, make sure you're setting alternative text for any images, or mark things as decorative. If you've got like background images, logos, shapes that are just decorative, mark them as decorative and they'll be ignored by screen readers. Now, in the same way that screen readers use styles in Word for navigation, in PowerPoint they use the slide titles. So it's important to ensure that all your slides have titles, and they should be unique as well, without duplicates. Again, as with Word, avoid hard to read text and colour contrast, and avoid having content that's too small or overcrowding as well, because it can make it really difficult for people to actually read and digest. You want people listening to what you have to say rather than focusing on squinting to try and make out what your slide actually says. And as I mentioned at the start, making sure that your slide layout is logical and in order is really important, because screen readers will read out the different artifacts on your slide in order. Now again, the good news is that as with Word, you can use the accessibility checker to flag up these issues and more, and it will help show you how to fix them as well. Now, moving on to section 3 of today's session, let's take a look at how you can use Microsoft Teams for social connections. In research shared by Microsoft, nearly 60% of people surveyed feel less connected to employees since working remotely more often. Now, 60% is a huge number. And the experience of working for an organisation, it doesn't only involve the rational part of the brain. We, human beings, we're creatures of emotion, and without a physical office, without, physical interaction with your colleagues to help transmit, the values, the culture, the vibe, we need to look for other ways to, to create that feeling of culture, to create those social connections, to share the mission. This is a big problem. I mean, Microsoft have just announced their new employee experience platform, Microsoft Viva, which obviously looks at this it looks at this big problem in much more detail. So as with the accessibility tips that I shared in section 1, the things that I'm going to share with you are kind of practical tips that you can do now to kind of help address this problem. But it won't solve the problem as a whole. I think tools like Microsoft Viva will have so much impact on this. But this, what I'm going to share with you is a few tips on how you can use Teams to kind of create a bit of that feeling of culture, help keep your culture alive, and have some fun in the process. Now, one good way to do this, and something that I've done a lot of over the last year, is to use Teams to run social events. Helen Keller famously said, "Alone we can do so little, together we can do so much." And I absolutely think that is true. Research shows, and I've seen this in my own life, that over the last year, the increase in, the number of Teams meetings has been relentless. And being in back-to-back work calls can be mentally exhausting, especially when, you're switching from one topic to another and you're straight in, and then you finish and you go to the next meeting and you have to be on your on your A game straight away. So there's some things that you can do to kind of build breaks in and stuff like that, but actually it's super important that you create the space for off-topic conversations within your organisation. And one way to do this is with coffee mornings. Now, it could be virtual coffee mornings in a group, It could be encouraging people to book one-on-one virtual coffee breaks using something like coffee roulette, or just making sure that people have the psychological safety to, to feel safe just booking some time with a colleague for a catch-up on a morning, without needing a work-related reason to do that. And this is a really good way to, to encourage people to stay connected with their peers and to show them that it's still okay to take time to catch up with people and to talk about things which are not necessarily work-related. And, in a similar vein, if you're meeting with colleagues and you don't need to share content in your meeting and you're just having a one-to-one or a casual team meeting, get up, go out, get away from your desk, get outside, go get some fresh air and go for a walk and have a bit of a walk and talk meeting. Sunlight and fresh air is really good for us, and it's one thing that we absolutely don't get enough of due to lockdown. And this can be a great way to connect with your colleagues while also disconnecting from the screen a little bit. So over the last year, I've run lots of kind of bigger events, like quizzes, challenges, and I've tried quite a few different formats to mix it up and stop it feeling samey and, keep people entertained. And I've just got a couple of things that I'm going to share with you here. So first of all, we ran a team scavenger hunt. And how this worked was people joined the Teams meeting on their mobile device, and they were sent the challenge to collect a number of items from around the house, with a new item coming out every minute. Now, obviously we started this with a little bit of a health and safety warning, as we didn't want any broken legs. I didn't want people falling down their stairs. But actually it was a really great way, to get people moving, to get them up, get them away from their desk and have a little bit of a laugh. And actually one of the guys on the call, his wife said she'd not seen him move so much since the start of lockdown. So there was a little bit of bonus exercise in there as well. And then we've also had virtual quiz evenings as well. So I've used platforms like Crowdper and Kahoot to run virtual quizzes, and I've actually used both of them quite a lot. And the way that I do this is to set up a normal Teams meeting and then set up the quiz in the quiz platform, and everybody joins the meeting on their computer, and they join the quiz platform on their mobile app, and then I share my screen with the kind of quiz in presenter mode so that everybody can see the questions on screen, and then people use their mobile phone to answer. And this is, it was just, every time we've done it, it's gone down a treat. It's just been kind of a really informal way to, to have a bit of fun and bring out people's competitive edge. And we've had quite a lot of people who've started at the company as new employees while we've been in lockdown. And being able to do things like this, while it's not the same as being in person, it still shows that we've got, kind of a people first and friendly culture. And, I think it helps them feel more welcomed into the company and more like part of it. And quite a lot of people across the business live on their own, and so they're even more socially isolated than those of us who are kind of locked down with partners or family. And activities like these, whilst they're not kind of the solution to the problem, they can be a great way to help people connect with each other and reduce some of those feelings of isolation and loneliness. Now, another way that you can use Teams to improve feelings of belonging and some of the social cohesion in your organisation is the praise feature. I've loved this since it was first released in Teams, and I use it a lot to give people a shout out when they do something good. However, one of the things that we've done recently, which I really love, is to add our own custom praise badges in the Teams Admin Centre. And you can see some examples on screen of some of the badges that we've added, which are aligned to our corporate core values. And, these are available now for everybody to kind of to use to praise their peers, which is great, and it can be a great way of increasing employee engagement. And studies show that peer-to-peer recognition is incredibly important and really key to improving feelings of social cohesion. So this is a super simple thing that you can do that can actually help, help bring your kind of culture into the digital experience that people have. Okay, so we're on to the last section. The end is in sight. And in this last section, I'm going to talk to you about running more inclusive meetings. Now, meetings have always been a bit of a minefield anyway, tending to be dominated by those louder, more assertive people. But since moving to this situation where everybody's working virtually, I think it can be even more challenging. You know, virtual meetings magnify the challenge of being inclusive and making sure that everybody has a chance to contribute and that all voices have equal weight. And it's more important now than ever that we do make sure that everybody feels heard and that everybody can speak up. So it's vital to provide emotional and psychological safety. And it's worth adding, I know I said this at the start, but it is worth adding again, this isn't a technology problem. This is a people problem. And the fact that we're all remote just makes it harder to manage. But thankfully, there are a few practical things that you can do and some features in Teams that can help a little bit with this. So I'm going to share some practical tips for things that you can do before the meeting, during the meeting, and then after the meeting to make sure that your meeting is as inclusive as possible. So before the meeting even starts, there's some things that you should be doing to maximise success. It is absolutely crucial to define the purpose. What is the point of the meeting? What are you trying to achieve? What is the objective? What is the decision that you need to make? And then this purpose, along with a clearly defined agenda, circulated ahead of time, will help the people that you invite assess whether they actually need to be there or not. And it's also really important that you don't invite a cast of thousands and that you only invite people who need to be included. The challenge though is that actually you want to also make sure that you've got a diverse representation on your invite list so that the decisions that you make are being made as a result of a diverse set of views. Share any materials that people need to read ahead of time. Within an organisation there'll be people who think fast, people who think slow, and there are some people who, they tend to kind of process things better when they've got time to read in advance, to think about the problem and just think and process it. And springing things on them in meetings can actually put them at a bit of a disadvantage and you won't get the best out of them. So share the materials that you've got, share the agenda, and just help people prepare in advance. And I'd also recommend, as part of this kind of pre-meeting preparation, that you also share some ground rules as well. What meeting etiquette will you follow? How do you expect or need people to behave? And share this in advance along with the agenda and the pre-reading to really set yourself up for success. Then we move on to the actual meeting itself. Now, it's fair to say all of our diaries are extremely busy at the moment. So make an effort to stay on topic and stay on time as well. Be respectful of the fact that people have, they've given up their time to prepare and to attend, and that they've got other time commitments as well. So it can be helpful to make sure things stay on track. It can be helpful to park things like off-topic conversations that come up for further discussion at another time. And to make sure that you really stay focused on the objectives of the meeting. So start the meeting by setting out the agenda, setting out the objectives, and setting out the meeting etiquette again that you want people to follow. Encourage people to switch their cameras on. Now, I know it feels a bit weird if you're not used to it, but body language is a really key part of communication, and it can aid in understanding the points that people are trying to make. If people are not comfortable inviting their colleagues to see their home, then using custom backgrounds in Teams, again, it's a really safe way of being able to use your camera without having to share your surroundings. Now, as part of your ground rules, I'd encourage you to get people to stay on mute if they're not talking, to minimise distractions, minimise background noise, and then to use the raise hands feature if they want to speak. This will allow you as the facilitator to call on them in turn, and it will reduce the impact of people interrupting or talking over each other. And this can prevent the meeting from being dominated by the louder and more assertive of your attendees, and make it more likely that some of your quieter attendees will actually, raise their hand and speak up in the first place. And then following on from this, I'd also encourage you to actually call on people to contribute as well. I've been on many meetings where only a small percentage of the participants actually spoke up. Well, actually, everybody on the meeting would likely have had something valuable to contribute. So at the end of the discussion, of each discussion point, it's worth going around the virtual room and calling on the participants in turn, ensuring everybody has the opportunity to speak. It's worth remembering though that some people may be in a noisy environment. They may be in less than optimum surroundings for actually contributing. So accept chat contributions as well, and make sure that you're keeping an eye on the messages that are coming in so that you don't miss anything important. Now, we already took a quick look earlier at the subtitles feature in PowerPoint, and if you're presenting content, I'd encourage you to turn this on. However, if your team meeting is much more of a discussion, you can also make people aware when you kick the meeting off of the live captions feature in Teams, so that if they are in a noisy environment, or if they do struggle to listen, to kind of, if they've got hearing impairments, or they struggle to follow on with, online meetings, they can actually follow on through the live captions. And live captions now include speaker attribution as well. And I'll show you what I mean by that in just a minute. And then my last tip for ensuring a meeting is inclusive is to use things like the new forms for meetings add-in. Now, this is a really great way to capture things like decisions, viewpoints. You can run votes, and you may have a meeting where someone has an unpopular view, and they might be quite quiet. So that actually they feel too afraid to voice this. But actually, if you have a vote, you'll be more likely to get an accurate view of what people are feeling. And it's a good way of ensuring that people can contribute, even if they're scared to speak. So it's just a really great way to capture feedback. Now, I mentioned speaker attribution, and what you can see on screen is a video of me and one of my colleagues just testing this out. And what you can see at the bottom is that as we both talk, when we've got the live captions on, it actually recognises which one of us is speaking and puts our name next to the comment. So for someone who's having to follow on the conversation of a Teams meeting using live captions, it's really easy for them now to actually see who's saying what, which is incredibly powerful. So once you've had your meeting, there are a few more things yet to do just to make sure that that the meeting has been as inclusive as possible. First of all, provide the opportunity for people to provide feedback, both on the meeting topic itself, but also whether the meeting was as inclusive as it could have been. Was there any bias that you didn't pick up? Were there any opportunities to improve? You can share a summary of the meeting with all the participants as well, thanking them for giving up their time, providing minutes, providing actions, links to the meeting recording and the transcript, and any other meeting resources. And if there were additional stakeholders who have an interest in the outcome of the meeting but were perhaps not required to make the decision, you can also include these in any follow-up communications as well, making sure that the output of the meeting reaches everybody who needs it. You can use tools like Planner to assign tasks to people with deadlines. You can outline clear next steps and then schedule follow-up meetings as well, ensuring that you follow the same inclusive process to get the best possible outcome. So this brings me to the end of this session, and I just wanted to give a really quick summary of some of the things that we've been through today. So we've had a quick look first of all at some of the accessibility tools in Microsoft 365 and how these can benefit you as an individual. We've had a look at tips for making your content more inclusive, particularly in Word and PowerPoint, but there are some key lessons there that can apply across all content. And this can help you be more inclusive to your colleagues, to your customers, and increase the reach of your content. We've looked at how Microsoft Teams can be used to strengthen bonds across your organisation, which is particularly important when we're all working at home. And then we've finished by going through tips to make your meetings more inclusive, which will ultimately make them more successful and more productive. Now, each of these things alone can help you create a more inclusive workplace, but taking lessons from all of these and applying them to your organisation, to your team, or even just your own daily working practices will help you drive inclusion forward in a positive and constructive way. Now that just leaves me to say thank you so much for joining my session. It has been an absolute pleasure sharing this with you today. I'd love to hear from you. Please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn, to follow me on Twitter, and check out my blog, which is quite new. There's not a huge amount of things on there, but I'd love to hear your feedback, and you can find more details about all of the things that I've covered today. I hope you enjoy the rest of the summit. Thanks very much. Goodbye.